All right. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday. Although by the looks of it, it seems like most people have decided that it's actually Saturday today, but it's not. It's Friday. But fortunately, some people are here to keep me company. So Awais is here too. Good morning, Awais. Zartaj is here. Good morning, Zartaj. Mir is here. Good morning, Mir. Simran is here. Good morning, Simran. Hamad is here. Good morning to you. And Elizabeth is here. Good morning, Elizabeth. And Sean is here. Good morning, Sean. Okay. So, what on earth were we talking about yesterday? Oh, yes. Stereotypes and prejudice and discrimination, right? And so, stereotypes, again, are ideas that we have about certain groups of people or people that belong to groups, kind of based on usually what we see, right? And so, some stereotypes are kind of racial in origin or ethnic. Some have to do with gender, some have to do with sexuality, some have to do with religion or citizenship status or first language or any of these things. Sometimes we have stereotypes associated with them, right? And stereotypes are the knowledge component. They sort of tell us what people are like, right? And again, some of those have a grain of truth. Some of them are pretty spot on. Good morning. Some of them are completely wrong in every way, but you know, these stereotypes circulate, and they're part of socialization, and we tend to absorb them, right? And whether we believe them or not is one thing, but we learn them and we know about them, right? I said prejudice was the affective component, and so sometimes we develop a positive or a negative feeling based on the stereotypes that we know, right? And of course, if you know a lot of positive stereotypes about a particular group of people, you might develop a positive prejudice towards them and vice versa, right? And discrimination is where you do something based on your prejudicial feelings, right? You either do something or you don't do something based on those feelings. And so I used this example of the dog yesterday, and we sort of brainstormed a bunch of positive and negative stereotypes about dogs. You know, some of them are true, some of them are not quite true, some of them are true for some dogs and not others, but we know about them, right? And people, based on the stereotypes they believe and based on their personal experience, they develop positive or negative prejudices towards dogs, right? I have a positive prejudice towards dogs. I love dogs, right? But not everybody does, and I also understand that feeling as well, right? And so, based on those prejudicial feelings, you may discriminate in favor of the dog or against the dog, right? Your friend may call you and say, hey, I want to come over and hang out. And you may say, sure, but don't bring the dog. I'm discriminating against the dog. You wouldn't say that probably unless you were a strange friend, but I'm discriminating against the dog. Or you would say, yes, please bring the dog. You know, don't come over without the dog, right? You could positively discriminate against that same dog, right? So I think the dog example kind of helps. It's a little easier to understand. We talked yesterday a little bit about people expressing prejudices in kind of in public, and you know there are some prejudices that are you're not really allowed to express, right? And so people who have sort of racial prejudices, most people, you know, can sort of read the room, if you will, and they know that if they hold a prejudice against a racial or ethnic group, most people are kind of savvy enough not to say it, at least. Some people not so much, right? But people will express other prejudices, especially when they think that they are fact. And again, if you go back in time in the United States, I don't know, 60 or 70 years ago, you would see white people very openly expressing their prejudice against Black Americans. And again, they were expressing it because, you know, it was more okay to do so, but also because some of these people believed that this was fact, right? That Black Americans were somehow inferior to white Americans, right? Less hardworking, less reliable, less intelligent, less kind of ethical or moral or whatever you want to say. They actually believed that these things were the truth. And so, you know, I have video, and I won't show it here, but I have video, and some people are very, you know, comfortable just expressing their prejudice. And when you see it, you're like, but again, at the time it was different because it was assumed to be fact. And so I was kind of challenging you with the example here of Tess Holliday's cover on Cosmo magazine, right? She's a little bit different than most of the models we see on Cosmo. And so Piers Morgan here made a statement about kind of condemning the choice, Cosmo's choice to put her on the cover of the magazine. And my question was, was he expressing a prejudice against people who are overweight, right? There are negative stereotypes that circulate around people who carry extra weight. He may have a negative prejudice towards those people. And so my question to you was, is he expressing his prejudice here, just kind of framed in, concern for health, right? And again, certainly, if you carry extra weight, there are health considerations associated with that, right? Whether the weight causes those issues or whether those issues are connected to the weight, it's complicated, right? Human bodies are complicated. But yeah, I asked you, is he kind of expressing his prejudice here? Or, maybe another question, have you heard people express their prejudice towards people who are overweight in other places? I think yeah, we probably all have, right? And so again, it's the same thing, right? Is that, we see someone like Tess who is overweight, we may have negative stereotypes about her, or positive ones. That creates a reaction, and then sometimes we do something about it. And so, whether you think Piers Morgan here was expressing prejudice or not, I'll leave up to you. It's a bit of a gray area. He doesn't come right out and condemn her. And again, I'm sure that there were many hurtful comments that were made about Tess's presence on the cover here. But yeah, something to consider. And I especially want you to consider what he said in the context of, again, the stereotypes that exist and the negative prejudice that people sometimes have towards people who are overweight. And I want you to consider his comments in the context of a society that is trying to convince us that is not beautiful, right? Beautiful is slim, right? Beautiful looks a particular way, right? And again, I think that we're starting to see a more kind of inclusive version of what beauty is, at least in Western society anyway. But up until very recently, there was a very narrow, literally and figuratively, a very narrow definition of what beauty actually was, right? And so, again, there's a lot of money invested in trying to get you to aspire to look a certain way, right? To look, the way that the industry has defined what beautiful is. And I think we can all agree that's a lot of money, right? That's a lot of money. And I mean, imagine if everyone just looked in the mirror and said, yeah, I'm beautiful the way I am, and walked out the door, right? And didn't put all this stuff on their face and on their hair and their gym memberships and their fancy running clothes and running shoes, and they went running all the time and took Zumba classes and all sorts of things, right? Imagine if everyone just said, yeah, I'm cool, I'm happy the way I am. There's a lot of companies that will go out of business if you look in the mirror and like yourself, right? So, again, I'm just asking you to consider his comments in the context of those ideas, okay? Right, so discrimination is an action. Let me show you some examples of prejudice and stereotypes and discrimination. The dog example is good for us, but let's see some things happening in the real world, okay? So, this study here, which I will not make you read, because it's probably 30 pages or so. Oh, it's 23. I will not make you read this study, but good morning. But it is very interesting, okay? It's a very interesting study. And so the name of the study here is, Are Emily and Greg More Employable Than Lakeisha and Jamal? A Field Experiment on Labor Market Discrimination. So this is from a few years ago. Here you can see from 2004. And here's what these two researchers did. Two researchers from University of Chicago. So they looked at the help wanted ads in the newspaper, okay? And then they made up a bunch of fake resumes, okay? And so the fake resumes all were kind of tailored to the job. Good morning. They were all tailored to the job, and they sent these fake resumes in response to the help wanted ads. Now, if let's say there was a job for, oh gosh, I don't know, a UPS driver, okay? So UPS needs drivers, so these two make up some fake resumes and send them out. And they make up two resumes that are pretty much the same, right? They change a few details so that they're not exactly the same, change the font and all that. But the two resumes have equal experience and equal credentials, equal education, okay? The difference between these two fake resumes is that the names. And so on one, the researchers would put a kind of stereotypically white name. So a name like Greg Baker or Emily Walsh, when you hear a name like that, that's a white person's name. And then on the other half of them, they would put a name that sounded stereotypically black. So Jamal Jones or Lakeisha Washington. Not a lot of white people with those names in the United States. Those are stereotypically black Americans' names. So they sent them all out. They sent them to all kinds of different occupations. So some UPS drivers, dishwashers, accountants, maybe some financial officers. So kind of jobs throughout the economic spectrum, okay? And so what they were looking for is who was going to call them back? Who would call them back for an interview on these resumes? And so what do you think happened in this study? Greg and Emily got called up first? Well, unfortunately, you're right. I would love to be able to say you're wrong, but you're not. That is what happened. Sorry, that is what happened. And so the resumes with white-sounding names got callbacks more frequently than with black-sounding names. And maybe since we're on the topic here, I'll just you may not know who this actor is. Let me just, there he is. You may not know who this actor is. This is Cal Penn. Have you ever seen him before? Yeah? What have you seen him in? What? Yeah, I think he was in The West Wing, if you've seen that television show. If you know about the Harold and Kumar movies. Yeah? The parody of? Maybe. What? There's a parody of the Narnia thing? Okay, that I haven't seen. He could be in it. But, what's that? Do you know what it's called? Okay. It sounds like something he might be involved with. He's been involved, he's an actor, American actor. He's been involved in a lot of things. Again, The West Wing, a television show, very popular. Harold and Kumar, he's Kumar. If you like those kind of, actually they're pretty funny, those movies. But if you look here, Cal Penn's real name is Kalpan Suresh Modi. That's his parents are of Indian or kind of South Asian descent. Cal here, I think, was he born in the United States? Where's his early life? Yeah, he's born in New Jersey. Okay. So Cal, when he was starting out as an actor, he actually did this experiment himself. And so when you apply for acting jobs, you send out your headshot, right? And he had two sets made up. And one said Kalpan Suresh Modi, and the other ones said Cal Penn. Who do you think got more jobs? Cal Penn did, right? Same guy, right? Exactly the same guy. But again, Cal Penn, the English-sounding name got more callbacks, right? Just the same as it did here in this experiment. And so what the researchers kind of saw is that when they had similar credentials, the black names got called back less often. They got fewer interviews. When they increased the credentials, so when the black resumes had more experience or more credentials, the white names still got more callbacks. And the other thing they noticed is that this kind of the level of discrimination stayed the same no matter where in the economic spectrum you were. So kind of, the low-paying jobs to the high-paying jobs, the same pattern showed up. And they tried it in Chicago and they tried it in Boston. So they tried it in two major US cities, and they still got the same results. And so the question you might want to ask, or the question you might have answered for yourself, is like, what's going on here, right? Why are white names getting called back more often? And clearly we're seeing some discrimination here, right? Again, there were thousands of resumes sent out, different industries, different cities. We see the same pattern coming back, right? So what's happening, right? Is everyone a racist, right? Like, can we trust no one? And the answer is no, but also maybe yes, okay? So what the researchers suggested was happening here was that people's kind of stereotypical ideas were kind of getting in the way, right? And so I said earlier on that our culture and our socialization is a lens that we look through, right? And it kind of colors, if you'll forgive the pun, it kind of colors our experience of the world, right? It changes the way we see things. And so here in this study, the researchers suggested that probably what's happening here is not necessarily full-blown racism, right? We probably don't have HR managers, like Keisha Washington, that's probably not happening. There might be a few, right? There's always a few racists mixed in, could be a few. But probably what's happening is that people are seeing these resumes through their stereotypical ideas, right? So the authors here argue that a lot of discrimination happens without people really being aware of what's going on, right? And so what's happening here is that there's kind of these racial filters, okay? So if you imagine an HR manager looking through resumes and seeing, a bunch of white people names, and then coming across the application of a black American, right? Suddenly there's all of these kind of stereotypes are triggered, right? And so the HR manager is now looking at this resume kind of through the lens of the stereotypes that they have absorbed. And this is all happening kind of subconsciously, right? This isn't happening, people aren't thinking about this, it's just kind of happening, right? And often it happens when the type of person we expect isn't the type of person that's there, okay? So if I ask you, let me give you another example. Close your eyes and picture a kindergarten teacher. Okay? Kindergarten teacher. Is she a woman? Yeah, she's a woman, right? And that's not a strange thing to have popped into your mind, because statistically speaking, most, elementary school teachers, and particularly kindergarten teachers, most of them are women, right? So that's not a strange jump to make. So imagine we're going to start a kindergarten here at Columbia College. I know that makes no sense, but pretend we are. We're going to build up all the way to grade 12. So we're going to start a kindergarten here at Columbia College, and we send out a call for resumes. We get a bunch back. We're flipping through them, all of these women applying to be a kindergarten teacher here. And then we come across the resume of a man. Now that's kind of weird, right? Because there's not a lot of male kindergarten teachers, and he's probably maybe one in a stack of 10 or 12 or whatever it is. And so probably what would happen for a lot of us is like, subconsciously, that's kind of weird. Why does this guy want to teach kindergarten. What's wrong with him? Is he a sexual predator, or is he gay, or what's his deal, right? Why is he doing this thing that we don't expect him to do? Is that bad? We don't want to discriminate. Maybe he's gay. Oh, that, maybe it'd be nice to have a gay person. I don't know. And then all of a sudden you're caught in, all of these stereotypes trying to evaluate this person. Whereas, and again, a lot of this will happen subconsciously. Whereas all of those women, we just flip through their resume and look through their credentials, right, and their experience. We didn't think anything of their gender until we came to something that was different, right? And this is kind of, good morning, this is kind of the way it works with these kind of filters. In this case, it's a racial filter. Sometimes it's gender, sometimes it's sexuality, sometimes it's nationality, sometimes it's a religion. But minoritized groups tend to have stereotypes associated with them, and they are seen through them, okay? And I'm not saying that this is right or good or the way it should be, but I'm saying this is often the way it is. Dominant groups don't get seen the same way, okay? Dominant groups tend not to be kind of racialized or seen through stereotypes, right? Again, there's, in the United States, because white people are the dominant group, they are not racialized, right? They are seen as the normal thing, right? The default American is white. And again, I'm not saying that that's good or right or I approve of that, but that's kind of how it currently is. And so again, people who are non-white will be seen through kind of a filter of these stereotypes. And so again, it's more difficult for them to get hired, right? The white resumes people are just evaluating the experience and the credentials. For the black resumes, they're evaluating those things, but they're evaluating them through a lens of stereotype, right? About what people think they know about black Americans. And again, for the most part, this is probably happening subconsciously. People probably aren't aware of what's going on, okay? And in fact, some companies have actually moved to either they have someone do this or they kind of do it through the computer electronically, but many companies do it so that the person's name is not on the resume. So you can't see, you're just evaluating the person's experience and their credentials. You can't even tell what their gender is because their name is gone. So you're really just hiring the best person, whoever they might be. But again, when you leave the name on, people start to try to build a picture of who this person is, which again, I think is normal, right? If you're gonna hire someone, you want someone who's a good fit. But sometimes this gets in the way, particularly for minoritized groups. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, and so I know there's a lot of text here, but this is basically just what I've told you already, that the dominant group is usually not sort of stereotyped. In this case, white people are not racialized in this way, and so they're not seen through stereotypes the same way. Yes?
I have two, I don't know if that's suggestions or questions.
Sure.
But the first one is about the dominant group.
Yeah.
Do you think dominant groups get to change over time? Because there's this article that I read, I remember when I read it, it said before, men with overweight women,
Okay.
they were considered more hardworking and more responsible. So if you were a man in the left, I don't remember exactly the year, but you are considered to be more powerful according to your woman side. And then the high-paid class wanted to differentiate themselves from that economic other class. So they started considering slim and small. So that's where slim and small came. So do you think dominant groups change over time?
They definitely do. Yeah, I think we would come to that later, but it's definitely true because dominant groups also, like here we're saying they're not racialized, they're not seen through stereotypes, but dominant groups also get to kind of, because they have sort of social power, they're the ones who get to kind of determine what's cool, okay? And so for the most part, if we think about, popular culture, it's mostly kind of rich, wealthy, powerful celebrities that determine what's cool, right? People who work at Walmart, nobody's kind of trying to imitate them, right? Everyone's trying to imitate people with status and power. And so, yeah, people will, if the group in power wants to differentiate themselves, yeah, sometimes they'll either do things differently from the way that sort of minoritized or lower classes are doing it, or they can set a new trend that other people can't follow, right? So yeah, they will change in that they'll try to differentiate themselves, and then oftentimes the people who are lower on the ladder will copy them. There's a great example of that from Mean Girls, right? Remember when Janice cuts Regina's tank top, and Regina puts it on and sees that and then she's just like, oh well. And then what happens the next day? Yeah, everybody's wearing it. So Regina kind of has the status and social power to be able to do that, to just do something different, and then everyone else follows it, right? So am I kind of answering your question, Nicole? Yeah? Yeah, so yeah, again, the dominant group is the one who gets to decide what's normal, what's cool, right? Those are things the dominant group gets to do. And sometimes they change their mind, especially if everyone's already doing the thing that they're doing. They want to differentiate themselves. They want to do something different. Good. Okay, let me ask you another question. This may be an easy one. It may not be. Barack Obama, former president of the United States. Is Barack, Mr. Obama, actually to me, is Mr. Obama black or is he white? Black? Half? Halfway? What's that? He's lighter skinned. Yeah. Certainly there's a range of variation in human skin tone. He is not the darkest person around.
I think he's brown.
You think he's brown? Okay. What color of brown?
Kind of look at that.
Kind of a caramel? Kind of a salted caramel, maybe? I don't know.
So you have like a name for those people. Nowadays they're called light skins.
They're called what?
They're called light skins.
Well, yeah, so his skin color, of course, is genetically influenced, right? And if you know anything about Barack Obama, he's got sort of mixed parentage, right? His father is from Kenya, his mother is American, a white woman, and so he's kind of half and half, if you will. But how has he presented himself to the world? In terms, what's that? Yeah, he has identified himself and presented himself to the world as a black man. That's his identity, right? Technically, yeah, he's a bit of both, but he's identified himself that way. Either way, ultimately it probably doesn't matter very much. But what's interesting is when you ask people this question. And so some psychiatrists, or psychologists I should say, did a study where they asked people this very question. And what they did, well, not this very question, but what they did was they gave people a bunch of different photos of Obama, maybe 10 photos of Barack Obama. And they had kind of edited each photo slightly. So in some pictures his skin appeared a little bit darker. In some photos his skin appeared a little bit lighter. So there was kind of a range of skin tones that were represented. Again, it wasn't extreme, right? He never looked white or, very, very dark. They were all just subtle variations, and they said, which photo is kind of most representative of what Obama truly looks like? Which photo do you choose? And so people would say, I think this is most representative of him. Which in itself is kind of boring. But the results are not. The results are interesting. And what they found is that, again, the color that Barack Obama is kind of depends on who's looking. And so what they found was that people who were kind of more inclined to like him saw him as lighter skinned. So Obama is a Democrat. He's a member of the Democratic Party. So college students who were liberal and had sort of had similar political views to Obama, they tended to choose lighter pictures of him. Conservatives or Republicans, the opposite party, they tended to choose darker photos of him. And again, the difference was quite slight, right? You don't want to make it so extreme that people know that it's not right. But again, people who liked Obama tended to see him as lighter. Now, why do you think that would be? Why do you think that pattern would show up? Because the man is just one color, right? He doesn't change colors on the day. His skin is one color. Why do people see him differently? Or why do we see this pattern, I guess, I should say? Yeah. What's that, Nicole? Yeah. In the U.S. there is a positive association with whiteness and with lightness, and so people actually who like Obama see him as lighter, and again, people who disagree with his politics see him as darker, which is bizarre, right? That literally says that your beliefs change the way you see the world, right? It's actually changing the way you see Barack Obama, whether you like him and agree with his policies, well, most of them, or if you don't, you literally see him differently, which is completely bizarre, is it not? But yet, the test shows this, right? It shows that people have absorbed this bias, and it appears, right? It appears when you know how to test for it. Completely bizarre. Do you remember any examples of discrimination from Mean Girls? So where someone did something or didn't do something based on someone else's kind of group membership, which examples of, I know it's been a week or so, but
Calling Janice a lesbian.
Right. So they called Janice a lesbian, but what did Regina also do?
Spread the rumors.
Spread the rumor, but in the past, remember the story? What was the story that Regina told Katie about Janice? Well, she thought so, right? Because they used to be friends, and then there was a pool party, and did Janice get invited? No, she didn't get invited to the pool party because Regina thought she was a lesbian, right? That's discrimination right there, right? Turns out she's not lesbian, she's Lebanese. I think that's the joke anyway. We don't really know much about her sexuality in the movie. She was dancing with Kevin Napur at the end, so who knows? But yeah, so that's a discrimination, right? She couldn't go to the pool party because Regina felt she was a lesbian. Other ones. some positive and some negative discrimination in this movie. Yeah, yeah. So Regina is nice to Katie because she's pretty, right? And she gets asked to join the plastics in part because of that, right? So they positively discriminate against or towards Katie because she's pretty, right? So she gets asked to join the group. What else? Other discriminations, positive or negative? One of them has to do with Kevin Napur. I just mentioned him.
Who is Kevin Napur?
Kevin Napur is the head of the mathletes, and the badass MC. His words, not mine. What? He discriminates twice in that film. There's two discriminations with him. What does he say about who he dates?
Doesn't he want to something like that?
Yeah, he's like, no, because initially it comes out that it seems like Katie might have a crush on him. She doesn't, but he's like, sorry, I only date women of color, right? So yeah, he's discriminating, right? It's fine. There's one more discrimination with him. What's the first thing he says to Katie when he meets her in the classroom? Do you remember?
Hey, Africa.
Hey, Africa. Yeah, he calls her Africa because he thinks it's cool. It does sound kind of cool. But what?
I didn't think we need to remember the maths. Something like that.
It sounds like something he would say, but that's not that's not what he says. But that sounds like him. He says, "Hey, why don't you join the mathletes? We get extra money if we get a girl. If we have a girl on the team, we get extra money, and I want jackets this year." Right? So he's asking Katie to join the mathletes. Why? Money, but because she's a girl, right? She's also good at math, which you need to be, but she's a girl, right? So he's positively discriminating against her, trying to get her to join the team. Let me see, other examples. There's more. What about when they go to the dress store? When Regina's trying on the dress?
Oh, you said they only have sizes 1, 3, and 4, or 5, or something like that.
Yes, yeah. The store's actually called 135 because those are the sizes that they have. People who know about dress sizes, what are size 1, 3, and 5? They're tiny. Yeah, they're tiny. Most women are not. I think probably the average woman is like a size 6 or 7, maybe. Maybe I don't really know. Yeah. So yeah, like yeah. So they're definitely on the small side, right? A size 1 is tiny, right? And 3 and 5 are quite small too. And so yeah, so that store only sells those sizes. And so are they discriminating? Yeah, right. Basically, anyone who is not super slim or tiny cannot shop there, right? And the person who works at the store says to Regina, "Well, you could try Sears." And Regina's terrified, horrified at that. But yeah, the store discriminates, right? What else? Anything else? Trying to think. Sartaj says here, the teacher was called a drug dealer, but actually she was not. I wouldn't call that necessarily discrimination. I think that's just a false accusation, right? So they made up a rumor about her. It was not true. Not discrimination, just, starting destructive rumors. Okay, let me see what I had here. Right. Okay, yeah, we got them all. Unless there's anything I'm missing. I might be missing some. These are the ones that just kind of popped into my head. If you think of any others, let me know. Or Andre, do you have one? Good. Okay.
When she was still in class, she said she's the one South Africa.
Uh huh.
They looked at the other guy.
Right. Yeah, they looked at so when yeah when Ms. Norbury, the teacher, is told she has a new student from Africa, and she immediately looks at the one black student in the room and says, "Oh, welcome," and it's like, "I'm from Michigan," right? So is that discrimination?
Yeah.
Is it?
Kind of.
Kind of?
It's just being
Oh.
racist.
Oh,
I think it's the same way you mentioned 135. They
Yeah.
all looked at them.
I know. That's crazy.
well, I looked at the women because I expected them to know dress sizes more than guys. I don't know, guys. Do you know your dress sizes?
Not even 6 and above.
Okay. Okay. So when she says when she greets the one black student in the room, assuming she's from Africa, and she says, "No, I'm from Michigan." Is it a stereotype?
Kind of.
It could be, right? I think the stereotype might be, yeah, all black people are from Africa, which is technically true, but not just from like it could be generations back, right? So that's kind of the stereotype. I think she just kind of she acted on the stereotype, but I don't know that she discriminated. I think she just made an assumption in that case. I think she just assumed that was the student, and in fact it was not. I don't know that I would call it a discrimination, but there's clearly a stereotype there, right? And Ms. Norbury made the wrong assumption based on her stereotype. I don't know that she discriminated necessarily, but it's a good example of a stereotype for sure. And they play with that stereotype a couple times in the film, right? Where the plastics find out Katie is from Africa, and Karen is like, "Well, then why are you white?" Okay, I think that's pretty good. What's my next slide here? Oh yeah, okay. So, break time. Okay, let's take a little break. We'll come back, and then we'll talk about privilege. Yeah, I know, right? Should we just forget the break and just go right into it?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Come back in 10. We'll talk about privilege. Okay, and we are back. So, what I've tried to show you here is a couple of instances in which we can see discrimination happening, right? With the experiment with Barack Obama and with the resume study, right? And again, it kind of shows people's kind of implicit bias. So the biases that they have that are in the subconscious, under the surface, things they might not even be aware of, right? And I'm curious to see, like now I kind of know how the study goes, so I don't think I can do it, but I'd be curious to see if I was presented with those same images of Barack Obama. I wonder if I would choose a lighter colored one of him as well, right? I don't know, right? I don't know how, and that's one of the interesting things about some of these psychological studies is that they can,
After this class, I'll call them.
good morning. I'll just wait until you are all settled. So, I showed you a couple of examples of discrimination here, and again we could see it happening. And one of the really interesting things about psychological studies like the one with Obama is that they can help reveal people's implicit bias, right? They can help reveal how people's minds are kind of working subconsciously, right? Nobody would choose to discriminate, not nobody, most people would not choose to discriminate. Most people are not, consciously making these decisions, but there's a lot of things that happen kind of under the surface in the mind, and little experiments like the one with the pictures of Barack Obama, they help to kind of bring those things to the surface so we can see them, right? Similarly with hiring, it's kind of hard to know, if there's any discrimination in hiring without kind of running an experiment like this. But again, we were able to see it. Again, the researchers suspect that, it's probably not a case of everybody purposely being racist. It's not, people aren't making these conscious choices, but there are things affecting their decision-making process under the surface, right? And the study doesn't explain that, but it does show us that something's happening, right? It shows us the pattern. So, what I'd like to talk about, this is kind of the last piece of the puzzle before we can dive into specific types of oppression like ableism or sexism or racism or whatever. This is kind of the last kind of thing we need to know about, and it has to do with privilege. So if I asked you, and I am asking you, what does that mean to you? What does privilege mean?
For example, you can do something other type of people cannot do.
Yeah. When,
Or specifically.
when you can do things that someone else can't do, right? Maybe for a specific reason. That's pretty good. Where do we often hear about people talking about privileges?
America.
Certain people can't reach for the driver's license.
Say that again?
Certain people can't reach for the driver's license.
Certain people can't reach for their driver's license. Why not? Yeah, because of these prejudicial ideas, right? And so some people have the ability to do different things, right? And basically that's kind of the heart of it, right? Often we hear about it in America. In the past, we probably heard about it either at school or at work or at home, right? Where you get to do something as a privilege, but if you're not responsible, your parents will take it away, kind of thing. Sometimes we hear about it in that respect as well. But that's basically what it means. But the way it applies to kind of social justice and social equality things is just a little more complicated because, Ben, as you mentioned, that is part of it. But privilege is kind of it covers a lot more things. And sometimes it's not so easy to spot or to understand. And particularly, it can be very difficult for the dominant group to see and understand when it's happening. Okay? But we'll talk about that in just a second. I have an article for you to read here. And it's one that often gets read when we talk about privilege itself. And it's a very popular article. Lots and lots of people have read it. And it's talking about white privilege, okay? And so I'm going to ask you to read this in a second, but let me just preface it. So Peggy here was in women's studies, okay? And so she was doing women's studies, gender studies, and she was writing a lot about male privilege, okay? Because men can do things that women cannot, right? And so men have certain privileges in basically all societies. So she was writing about that, and then she kind of stopped one day and she thought to herself, well, what about white privilege? Do I have white privilege too? And so she kind of wrote this article in as a matter of like her thinking through that what privileges do I have as a white person in, I think, the United States. And so in the article she'll talk a little bit about, you know, how she came to write it, because she was doing women's studies or gender studies and thinking about privilege, and now she's going to think about white privilege, okay? So what I would like you to do is read this article. It's not long and it's not difficult. And these are the questions that we want to answer, okay? So what does it mean to have privilege? How does privilege benefit those in the dominant group? That should have a question mark at the end. And how does it negatively affect those in the minoritized group? Are people with privilege doing something wrong? Okay. Can privilege be a good thing? And can you think of a way in which you have been or are privileged? Okay, and so to help you, Peggy has quite a long list of ways in which she has privilege. So I just want you to look and say, you know, do some of those apply to me, right? Or maybe did they apply to me in my home country, but now maybe they don't, or something like that. Some way in which you can connect with what she's talking about. Is that okay? All right. As usual, articles in Microsoft Teams. I don't think it's very long, if I remember. So let's do some reading, and then we'll talk about this in just in a few minutes, several minutes, many minutes. I'll figure it out. Bless you. That's not right. Did I put the right article in Teams? No. Oh yeah, I did. Okay. Whew. Oh. One more thing. Does everyone know what a knapsack is? You know what that is? It's kind of an older term for a backpack. So that's what she's talking about. A knapsack is a backpack just like behind Poon there. Or on just sitting beside any of you. Okay? How are we doing, guys? Still reading? What page are you roughly on? What's that? 5? 5? Okay. Okay. 3 more minutes, and then we'll talk about what we can before we're done. Okay. Okay, people. I know even if we're not quite done, close enough. Let's just discuss what we understand so far. So, the first question I asked you here is, what does it mean to have privilege? But I kind of think Andre, I think you kind of nailed it earlier on, right? When you, what did you say, if you remember?
Say like it's when they do something that others cannot do, but for people to do.
Yeah.
Because you have the means to do it, or the inspiration to do it, like more important.
Sure. So yeah, that's perfect, right? When you can do something that someone else can't do, right? And there's a bunch of different reasons why that might be. But yeah, your privilege is your ability to do something that others cannot, right? Actually, that was really good. Usually when things come out of my mouth, then they're gone. Sometimes that happens when I'm in like a college meeting and I say something and we want to record it in like the meeting minutes. And so I'll say it, and then if somebody doesn't get it, it's like, oh, I have no idea what no idea what I just said. It's just out and it's gone. So that was good. Yeah, so the ability to do things that other people cannot. Now, the second question here, how does, and there's a lot of things in this article, but how does privilege affect people who have it? What are some of the things that the author tells us?
They don't realize it.
Yeah, often people with privilege don't realize that they have it, right? Why do you think that they don't realize that they have it?
They're not taught. They're taught everything else but privilege.
Right? So people in dominant groups, people with privilege, usually are taught not to recognize it, right? It becomes invisible to them. Why else do you think they might not know?
For example, some privilege is in some country, and the people in different country don't the another people in another country know about this privilege.
Sure. So depending on who you are and where you go, your levels of privilege will kind of differ, right? Yeah, exactly. That's true. That's very true. Why else? Why else might people not realize that they have privilege?
They're part of the dominant group.
Right, they're part of the dominant group, and they're unaware. Yeah, and and speaking as a member of a few dominant groups here, it's tough to know, right? Like I walk around, Vancouver here, going about my business, living my life, and I find most people are nice to me. Now, why is that? Is it because I'm nice to most people? Maybe, right? Is it because I'm white? I don't know. I hope not, but maybe. Is it because I'm a guy? Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I don't know whether I'm good looking or not. I'll leave that alone. But if I am, are people treating me that way? Are people being nice to me because they like the way I look? I don't usually know that either, right? So it's kind of, in a lot of cases, it's tough to know because, there's so many reasons why, something might be happening. I got this job, right? Why did I get this job? Did I get this job because I'm white? I hope not. I don't think so. They didn't tell me when they hired me that, you're white, so you're in. That never happened. But that's also one of the things that makes privilege tough, is that you don't really know when it's working, right? You definitely know when it's not working, right? When you don't have privilege, when some of the things that Peggy mentions here, when you don't have those, right? You feel it, right? But when you're being advantaged, it's tough to know when it's happening. And this is maybe the last thing I'll say, one of the analogies I'll use next week is like if you go for a run, okay? Does anyone here like to go for a run sometimes? Sometimes, yeah. If you go for a run, and let's say you have the wind at your back, right? It's pushing your back. If you're running kind of the same speed as the wind, you don't even notice it's there, right? It's like the air isn't moving. And it is pushing you along, but you don't really feel it, right? And so you're running, and then you turn around to come back home, and then it's like in your face, and you're like, oh, where'd this wind come from, right? And then you're fighting the wind to get back home. And that's kind of what it's like with privilege, right? If you don't have it, you can feel the wind in your face, right? You can feel the resistance. But if you have privilege, you're running with the wind. And it's very tempting to believe that there's actually no wind at all, because you don't feel it, right? It's just gently pushing you down the trail or down the road. But people facing the wind feel it more, right? So, yeah, people with privilege are not taught to feel it. They are, they're not taught to. Sometimes it's difficult to know when it's happening. And when it is happening, you tend not to, you just don't know it, right? It's hard to tell. But again, when you don't have it, it tends to be very easy to tell sometimes. Should I just leave it there? We've done our work for today. Okay. All right. So that is all for today. You can pack it up. I will see you on Monday, or some of you in 20 minutes. I hope you all have a great weekend. Try to enjoy yourself, relax, get some sun. Is the weather going to be nice?
Yeah.
I think so.
It is? Okay, yeah. Get a little bit of sun and fresh air, and we'll see you Monday, okay?